Before I begin, I do want to give a shout out to all of my patrons. Without you, this content wouldn't be possible. So, JLo and Shakira are set to perform at the 2020 Super Bowl. They're going to be the first Latinas to take the stage since Gloria Estefan took the stage almost 3 decades ago. On top of that, the NFL is going to give a tribute to Los Tigres del Norte during the commercial break. And the main chef for all the Super Bowl festivities is going to be a Latina as well. So with all this Latinx representation and one of the biggest stages, one of the biggest events in the world, we should be happy, right? But the truth of the matter is that a lot of us don't think that all this Latinx involvement in the Super Bowl is necessarily a good thing. So today we're going to talk about why that is. Hi, I'm Ruben or Ruben, and you might know me as Queer Chicano Chisme. You can follow me on Twitter in the link down here. And yeah, I've been gone for a minute, but we're gonna get just right into it. Happy New Year, bitches. And I'm going to kind of preempt the backlash by stating that I'm not necessarily trying to cancel anyone, right? I would wager to say that I don't have the power to cancel anyone, especially not like millionaires and billionaires, right? This is just like criticism, right? And this is also, to be transparent, like this is also coming from a fan of sorts, right? Here's footage of me at the JLo concert. So without me, you'll be fine, right? All my life is all I have. And then here's footage of me at the Shakira concert. So don't come for me, JLo and Shakira stans, J-lovers and shakers, or whatever the Shakira stans are called. Anyway, so let's start with the history of what's going on with the Super Bowl. So in 2016, former quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, Colin Kaepernick, decided that he was going to take a knee during the televised national anthem ceremony that preludes every football game. He was protesting state violence against black people and people of color. In his official statement, Colin Kaepernick says, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." What followed was a media backlash as, everybody it was essentially keep your politics out of my sports, completely ignoring that politics are part of everything, including sports. Otherwise, why the heck are we singing a national anthem before a big sporting event? And it led to mad hysteria, and people were burning their 49ers jerseys and ripping up their Nikes. That was gonna hurt anybody because they had already bought the Nikes. But anyways, they ripped them up anyway to protest that Nike was sponsoring Colin Kaepernick, and they were basically just suck it, you already paid for those Nikes, you're shit out of luck, we're good, we're still making money out of underpaid child labor. But that's a whole other conversation. And to be clear, Colin Kaepernick didn't break any football rules by kneeling during the national anthem, right? He didn't even break any football rules when he decided to wear pig cop socks during one of his practices. He hasn't broken any rules. The right likes to push around this freedom of expression and freedom of speech shit, and he was just practicing his freedom of speech. And as a matter of fact, the national anthem hasn't always been a part of the football game thing. It was a thing that began after the First World War, and then really cemented itself after the Second World War, right? They were trying to basically wind up and promote patriotism, right? Because that's what wars are really big on. And so after the wars were over, they were well, why should we stop promoting patriotism? We should really be about that shit. And so they kept playing that, right? But the thing is that players weren't forced to go on the field until 2009, right? Except with the exception of after 9/11. So that brief period afterwards, everybody was all patriotic and shit. So everybody was on the field and all about the flag. But it wasn't until 2009 that players were really expected to be on the field. Prior to that, they would like be off field, like in the locker rooms, right? Like getting ready for the game or whatever, playing towel games or slapping each other's like jock strap, whatever people do in the locker rooms, right? I don't know. I ran cross country, I didn't play football. Additionally, in 2015, it was revealed that the Department of Defense paid $6.8 million to various like sports leagues, right? Like the NBA, the Major League Baseball, the NFL, and like hockey or whatever. It paid all of these folks like hella money so that they could play the national anthem prior to games and make it like a big thing, right? And it didn't only include the national anthem, it also included things like, I don't know if you've seen like during the commercial breaks of sports games, there's also like we salute our troops and like stories of troops and shit like that. And it's like all of that was paid for by the Department of Defense, right? So the state is really invested in like bringing in politics into sports. So like literally invested, like with shmoney, like with real American dollars, right? So it's kind of laughable that people are like, take your politics out of my sports, because they're already in there, like they're there. So I think the question here is like, what politics are acceptable in sports, right? There's no radical leftist politic allowed in there, because that by nature is anti-capitalist, and these major league, sports games they're capitalist like shows essentially, right? Because who owns most of the teams, right? Like rich white men. And who's invested in them? Again, the state. So after not breaking any rules, Colin Kaepernick was not picked up by any team in the season after he decided to take a knee, right? So his career has pretty much been over since like 2017, like early 2017. He basically put his whole like career on the line for this. And in 2019, Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid actually filed a grievance against the NFL, saying that they were blackballed for their political actions by the NFL, right? The NFL actually settled out of the court, which doesn't really look good on anyone really, but specifically for the NFL, because it basically says like they're in a way admitting guilt and they just want the bad publicity to end. And because all of this, a lot of black celebrities have refused to have any involvement with the Super Bowl, right? Rihanna has actually been asked to perform at the Super Bowl, but she refused. Then Cardi B was asked to perform with Maroon 5 whenever they performed, and she also refused. So that's when like Jay-Z came in and he's like, oh shit, like the NFL was freaking out, and they were like, oh, we need like some sort of like PR control. And then Jay-Z came in and he was like, what if we rehabilitate your image by bringing in like black celebrities, right? Like Jay-Z, to be like, hey, everything's okay. They're not, the NFL isn't racist, right? And so he created like this initiative called the Inspire Change, like social justice initiative, to like invest like NFL, resources into social justice causes, right? And like it must be noted that this is like not non-profit work, right? Like this is like for-profit work. This is like capitalism disguising itself as social activism. In any case, as part of his like social justice initiative, like Jay-Z brought in a bunch of artists for like the kickoff concert, like Meghan Trainor, like, which are like, what the heck? And that was just the launch, right? Afterwards, right, in October-ish, it was announced that JLo and Shakira would be taking the stage at Super Bowl 2020, right? And that was supposed to be like a big deal, right? Because it's, Latinx representation, like, two superstar Latinas like taking the stage, like, no Latina has been offered the stage for like almost 30 years and blah, blah, blah. It was supposed to be like a social justice message thing, like, oh, look, here are these people of color performing on the biggest stage in the world. Their excuse, right, or the excuse that a lot of people are putting out there is that, like, Latinxs are being attacked by Trump, right, by the current administration, was like xenophobic rhetoric and racist rhetoric, and like the violence in the border. And so it's trying to like sweep all this, like trying to make this a whole like grander social justice issue, right? But that ignores that like Colin Kaepernick was not like kneeling and didn't lose his career for like general social justice, right? He was kneeling to protest the extrajudicial killing by the state of Black people. And so, you know, getting all these Latinxs involved, right, like JLo and Shakira, is like us non-Black Latinxs accepting an apology for something that didn't happen to us. As writer Melanie Luisa Marte said in the article, 3 Black Latinas share their thoughts on Kaepernick and the Super Bowl, unfortunately, moments like these continue to prove that there is a lack of solidarity within Latinidad, and much of it has to do with race, right? So these, you know, acceptable emblems of Latinidad, right? And that, I say acceptable because, you know, they could have brought in a Black Latina like Trina or Khalees into the fold, but instead they brought like 2 Latinas who have adjacency to whiteness, right? They're the acceptable figures of Latinidad. And I understand that like under like a Western gaze, like sometimes these 2 women might be seen as people of color or women of color. The truth of the matter is that like race is more complicated than that, right? So in some places, Shakira might be seen as a white woman, and JLo might be seen as white as well, right? Again, not in the US necessarily, because things like accents and you know, people's ethnicity is racialized in a US context, but we have to remember that the US is not like the only lens under which people are racialized. Of course, with all of that said, I'm not saying that like we should be looking at celebrities to be like the, you know, the lighthouse for social justice issues, right? Like nothing radical can ever come really from the top. But it's important to call this out because unfortunately for a lot of people, their activism begins and ends at representation. To a lot of people, having these 2 big Latina stars on the biggest stage in the world, and having like a Latina cook for the Super Bowl, and having, you know, Los Tigres del Norte like being honored, like to a lot of people, that is a win, right? And a lot of people find empowerment within that. But I want folks to ask themselves is like, what good is this representation if it's just going to keep them upholding the same oppressive systems that continue to harm marginalized people? Additionally, as non-Black Latinxs, I think that it's really important that we look at ourselves in the mirror and really investigate why our empowerment always has to come with a side of anti-Blackness. But what do you think? Feel free to drop a comment below. I know this is going to be a really emotional topic for some folks, particularly Latinxs who feel some sort of way about being called out, you know? This isn't like a you're bad for being empowered because Latinxs are given like representation. It's more like a, hey, let's like take a step back, let's disengage and like really take a critical look at what's going on, right? So feel free to drop a comment. Thank you for joining me. If you want to support the creation of more of this content, I will drop my Patreon link in the description below, and also other you know, pay links if you want to give me a tip for, you know, breaking this down for you. Yeah, thank you for joining me, and I hope you come back again in a couple of weeks. All right, bye.